Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we are looking at group audit. We're not doing a start to finish guide on how to produce a group audit. Rather, we are looking at Caseware functionality to help you more efficiently produce your group audits, things like the components and bringing in files and that sort of thing. So we're going to give you some tips on how to get the most out of Caseware functionality. My name's Tom Jeffrey. I'm one of the education and media technicians at Caseware UK, and I'm joined by Anthony Longthry, our senior education and media consultant. So we're going to be taking you through, or rather Tony's going to be taking you through most of the presentation. I've got a little snippet at the end, but we're going to be having a chat throughout. Hello, Tony. Can't see you yet, but he is there. There he is.
Welcome, everyone.
So we're going to be asking each other questions as we go. But in terms of your questions, you can submit those through the Zoom control panel. So you've got the Q&A button there. If we just jump to the next slide, you've got Q&A and, we've jumped a couple of slides. But in your Zoom control panel, you've got a Q&A button, and then that will allow you to ask your questions, and we can get back to you as soon as we can. Also, if you wanted to ask a question live via your microphone, you can do so using the raise hand option, and we will send you an unmute request and you can ask us the question live. The last bit of housekeeping is we are recording the session, so that will be available on the knowledge base and on YouTube, and also any questions will be included in the Q&A document, but we'll let you know when that's available shortly after the session. So we're jumping onto the agenda.
Just as finally I get the slide ready for you. Sorry, Tom. A mishap before the webinar, obviously.
There's your controls there, just in case you weren't sure. And if you're on a mobile device, it's very similar. It's the one at the bottom.
Sorry about it, guys. I've obviously pressed the delete button before the webinar started. So yes, let's go back to the agenda. Have that up on the screen so you can see what we are covering. All right, so that should be loading up now for you. And as Tom said, we're not going through all the nooks and crannies of Group Audit. Again, it's half an hour, so I'm sure you didn't expect that. But what we will be doing is showing you how to set up within Caseware, what we need to look out for, how we should set the files up, and some considerations as and when we're sharing information and documents throughout the file. So, as Tom mentioned, there is a lot to cover today, and we've only got half an hour, so we want to try and get as much in as possible. With that being said, if we are going fast and you miss anything, the recording will be available on the knowledge base. And also, please do feel free to ask us questions as we go along if you want us to show anything to recover any areas. All right, so first on to holding companies then. So let's look at the first run of the ladder. Again, we've got some demonstration files today. Excuse me, and that first one should be showing up on your screen now. This is just a standard Caseware file. It's already been created, and we've already done some of the optimization. For anyone who is new to Caseware and who's new to Audit Advanced, Tom creates and is responsible for lots of getting started guys. So Tom, how many have we got there now already?
I think we've got just about 30 available now.
So there's lots of content there available for everyone who's new to Caseware. Effectively, when you create a new Audit Advanced file, and this is what we showed in the Get Started guide, and if anyone wants that, let us know. We'll add it into the Q&A. There is optimization to take part. So in this file, we've already carried out that optimization. Tom's already gone through and set some of these areas up for us to help us along. Now, the first thing when we're looking at these files is just to define that it is a group audit and that it is part of a group potentially. So here you can see there's a couple of questions down on the prelim assignment tailoring checklist that will say that it's either a sub or a parent and that it's a group audit. Now, these questions here are really important for getting the right documentation within our files. Now, Tom and I will both be talking to you about lead sheets and checklists as we go through. However, just to show you, we've set this up as a group audit file. So you get group planning documents, you go through and you get group completion documents, and these want to be set up from your file from the get-go. So if you see, if you've done the optimization, you don't have these documents, you can always drag those back in by going to the document and from the document library, or reinstating them from the AOCR document itself. However, we'll definitely want to have these in there because as you can see, as you go through, there's some key documents in here. So we've got our component materiality, it's going to be very useful. And we've also got our materiality document here as well. So that's the first part of the setup. The second part of the setup for the holding company, really, for this parent is, regardless of whether it's trading or non-trading, is to link it to the other components, to drive in the financials, So we can look at the group materiality, because as auditors, you'll be setting and looking at the component materiality, the group audit materiality, and also be looking at the individual materiality for that parent file as well. So the way we can do that within Caseware is using the consolidation feature. Now, again, we're going to go through a very short tour through this. So if there's any additional guidance you want, there's lots on the knowledge base, and let myself and Tom know, and we'll make it available. Okay, so this is a kind of a whistle-stop tour. Now, if we click on consolidate, what we'll see here is a new little window pops up, and it will allow me to go through and link in new entities. Now, there was a little message pops up there, and I'll get back to that in a moment. What effectively it was is I've got something open that I shouldn't have open if I want to use this screen. But just for demonstration purposes for today, what we'd want to do is effectively add the components to this list. Now, once you add the components to this list, you will then have access to that data from the TB. So here's my component 1 limited, and here's my holding company. But what we also may want in here is our component 2 or component 3, depending on how many components we've got in our group audit. So what you do is you go to consolidate, and you'd select our new button here. And then what you do from this stage is just set up your component. So I'm going to set up, again, no imagination. So we'll just select component 2 limited. And as I do that, it sets up an abbreviation. Now, Tom's going to look at this with you all a little bit later, and what these abbreviations are, what they're used for. But they're really useful, so make sure these are set up. Also, Caseware will tell you if there's any duplicates. So when we get to component, kind of spelled wrong type 2, that wasn't it. When we get to component 3, it will still be CTL, but Caseware won't accept that. It will want to be a unique reference. Okay. Now, at the stage here, I want to link it to an existing file, a Caseware file. So I click on existing, go to browse, and I go to browse again, the desktop, and then on my desktop, group audit data components, and there's my component 2 file. Okay, so I just go through and I'd select it and then press OK. And at this stage, there's some settings here that we need to know about. This will also be, all this information is available on the knowledge base and why we need to tick these and why we need to exclude them. But in most cases, we will just exclude all this on the left-hand side, except for prior year balances when we're setting up. And then what we'd need to do is, once we've refreshed that data and we've pulled in the prior year balances and we've entered in potentially eliminating journals that we need to enter, then we come back here and we remove that tick. Okay. And the reason why we remove it is so that Caseware doesn't automatically refresh the prior year data.
Okay. So, Tony, those are the settings to, if we wanted to link with an existing Caseware file. You can see the none option above there. So when would you use that?
Okay, so it depends where you look at. So group audit perspective, say, for example, you've got a dormant entity, you're not doing any, there's no real audit work for that dormant entity. So potentially you're just importing a trial balance to, so you have got the investment that's flowing through the shared capital within that entity. So in that case, maybe you wouldn't set up a Caseware file for that. So you go to none and just link it this way, and then you can import that entity's details individually without linking it to another file. It also may be the case that you're not actually the one who's carrying out and preparing the accounts for that entity. Maybe it's another accountant that's preparing the accounts and you'll rely upon their accounts. So that could also be another reason. Okay. All right. So at that point, then you just select OK. Oh, let's go back. And now add that to the list for you. It gives you this little warning triangle up. That warning triangle means that the data is not linked yet. So because the data is not linked yet, it wants us to refresh it. So you can press OK, apply, or consolidate all. If I clicked on the entity and pressed apply, it would just update that entity. If I press OK, it's going to go through and try and refresh that for me as well. Okay, I'm not going to do that now because I'm sure you guys don't want to watch that spinning around on the screen whilst we're going through the rest of the So I'm going to close here for the moment. And what I'm going to do is now go through. We can see we've got component 1. We've got the holding company. So what's the next stages really? So again, I mentioned the materiality and setting those up. So I'm just going to jump into documents and the B41 here. And this stage here, this B41, let's split screen a little bit as well. If anyone's on Teams and this is on Zoom, this is a bit smaller, I'll get back to a larger screen in a moment. Any problems working out what I'm doing, let me know. But effectively here, what we've got is I've got the data from the TB for the holding company, component 1, and potentially component 2, 3, 4, 5, all being added up here. and being sent over here. So when we look at the profit before tax, that's looking at the profit for the tax for all the entities that are set up within my TB. So if I look at my turnover there, that 27 million. If I go down my TB here, we look for L, there's my L's, there we go. Here, if I go to the tab across, you can see here there's the 23 million, and that's for the holding company. And then there's 4.4 million there, which relates to the component one. So both of these figures are being added up. Oh, wrong one. Both of these figures are being added up, and they're being driven onto this materiality document. Now, so that's going to be very good for our group materiality. And we can define that data by using a drop down. If I select component one limited here now, and then go back into the materiality document, it's just going to show the materiality for that entity, or the figures for that financial data for that entity. So make sure when you're working in the group file that you've always got this drop down selected as the holding company, because we'll consider that component individually within their own audit bag. Okay, so we won't want to be looking at this file here for the holding company. Okay, now at this stage here as well, this is looking at the holding company, and also is looking at the components. So it's not looking at the individual parent entity. So Tom, for this side, then what we do is we could potentially set up another file, which we'll talk about in a second, but you would record the individual entities documents within the component materiality document, schedule B41-1. Okay. This document is where we record the parent individual materiality level and performance materiality level, and you can just enter those within this cell here.
Now, what we're saying then is when you've got you're selecting the holding company, even when you're looking at you've got that selected in the trial balance, you go into the materiality, it's going to show the group figures. So this is splitting it out so that you've got the holding company as a single entity.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, for us, when we're preparing the audit, within the group audit file, there's only the group FSA that we're going to be applying that group audit materiality level to. Predominantly for most of the FSAs within that group audit file, we're going to be wanting to look at the parent individual materiality levels. So that's where we're going to set these up here. Okay. Now, to make this easier, what some people do, or some clients do, and what we recommend is they set up a separate caseware file. So this is a separate caseware file here for the single entity figures. So in this file, if I go to the trial balance, it's just got the holding company TB figures, and it's got sales. It's a trading company, so there's quite a lot of meat on the bones here. So what you could do is you could go to the documents here, and you could look at the materiality level, use the B41 document within the single entity file to assess the materiality level for the parent entity separately. And here we can see, okay, we've just got the 21 million here now, and for the turnover rather than that 27.5. So this stage, then we can say, okay, turnover is then going to be we're going to look at 1% of turnover, so 220 and 165 for the performance materiality. Perfect. So then at that stage, what we can say, well, here we go. There's our 220, there's our 165. Let's go and transfer that information for the parent individual figures over into the group audit file. So we would say you'd be doing any audit work really predominantly in this separate bespoke file that we just created for the single entity. But what you could use a separate caseware file as a tool. So create a new file for the holding company figures on its own. So we can prepare a separate FSA document, a B32 FSA. So in that way we could record our audit approach for simply that parent entity, and also we can have a separate materiality document which is more detailed than the B41-1. And at that stage, even if we're just using it to prepare the figures and transfer those over, at least that was going to give us a little bit more automation, a little more help as we go through. Okay, so that's the materiality, and that's all I've really got for the setup of the holding companies. I'm getting a bit mindful of the time. Have you got any questions, Tom, at this stage?
We've got a question, which is that you mentioned at the beginning that this holding company is a trading company. Presumably the setup would be the same if it was non-trading.
Yeah, absolutely. The setup would be the same, but if it's non-trading and it's just holding the investments, the automation in caseware is going to strip a lot of documentation out that we don't need. It may be the case as well as a firm, you would want to look at the level of planning documents and completion documents that are within your engagement. and ascertain actually, are these all relevant, and put some guidance together to say within your firm that, okay, this is the required level of audit work that we need to carry out for non-trading holding companies, because there is going to be a difference between a trading holding company and a non-trading. However, the functionality within Caseware is the same, the setup's the same. However, you may be doing a little bit more manual tailoring and removing some areas that aren't relevant. Okay, so there's just a little bit more setup. I think it's a little bit more care and thought if it's a non-trading entity, because there's a lot of documentation in there that we don't want to use and overrule it if we don't need to, especially when it's all about efficiencies. Okay, so I hope that helps answer that a little bit better. What we've got now to jump onto is the components. Okay, so with the component side, the setup of the files is pretty much the same. Apart from within that prelim, you say that it's not a group audit, but it is part of a group. Okay, so there's slightly different documentation that comes in, as you'd expect. And Caseware's automation really takes care of that for you. However, Tom, we do get a few questions, don't we, that come through the support desk, and also training about sharing documentation.
We do. So regular topic of discussion is getting getting documents from one file to another. And of course, if you've got, for example, an Excel document in one file, the instinct is to drag and drop it into the other one if you've got it open on another screen. Of course it is. But this is not what we recommend, is it?
No, it's by the Ghostbuster stop sign at the top there. It's not what we recommend at all. This can cause issues on the update process, especially when potentially we're working on files that file 1 may be a particular version of Caseware and file 2 may be another version of Caseware, depending upon who created those files, who updated those files. And if there is discrepancies there, that can cause issues with the update process. And the update process is a core part of the product that we need to make sure is working as efficiently and as quickly as it can do without causing anyone any downtime. So if we're getting up problems on updates, that can cause a bit of an issue. So with that said, though, we can copy documents. There's just a little extra step you need to do. So our recommended guidance is that you take a file from Excel file from file 1, you move that into a subfolder, and from that subfolder, you then take that file and you move it into file 2. That's going to allow you to have that independence, and it will not take that information with it regarding the template version of file 1. Because as soon as you drag into this file, it cuts that data and breaks the link. So that's the way we copy over. We recommend copying over Excel documents or external documents to Caseware. So things like Word, PDFs, and so on. Now, there's also other areas that pop up there on setting up files.
So in terms of we've seen this is a non-Caseware or non-Caseware specific type of document. So that's an Excel one, an example. Could we use copy components to bring those sort of documents in, or could we use it for things like lead sheets and document templates?
Okay, so the document templates, definitely. So you can have a master file with management letters, sampling documents, Word programs, i.e. the Excel documents that we create as auditors to back up the figures shown in Caseware. Definitely use that. I would suggest maybe a document manager is a better way or better solution to use than to using copy components, because it's let me show you my screen quickly. There we go. To use documents, use a document library, you can just have your documents from document library. And these are the ones that I'm sure everyone's familiar with, the company audit one. But what we can do is create your own one. I've got Anthony's library here, but what we could do is we could have a firm library. It's again a Caseware Accountants LLP library here, where we can drag these documents over. It's a lot quicker and easier than use copy components, and it doesn't take too long to train. So that's where I say there. Copying over case view documents, well, be careful with these, and I wouldn't use copy components for these either. The way these documents work are they're more vessels for information. So the actual information within these documents, in most cases, doesn't live within the documents itself. What those documents are there for is to show the information that's populated from the databases. So I could use copy components to copy the B31 from one file to the next. However, it wouldn't copy the information that's populated within the B31 within this file. What it will do is just copy the blank document And then because the databases are blank in file 2 and it doesn't contain the information yet, it will just show up as blank. If anyone needs any help or guidance on this, again, leave information and leave details on the contact in the chat fields, and myself and Tom will be happy more to go through with you. I think one of the areas we do get quite a lot is how to speed up the efficiencies of creating files, specifically within certain environments. So I think the groups maybe like a similar components. So if you're working on insurance entities or pension audits, so I'm like, there's others we get through the.
I think academies is a very good example. So if you had a large number of academy engagements, for example, you don't really want to be going in and tailoring each one in the same way.
Definitely. We use so from this, like if Tom was setting up an audit file, Tom wants to do 20 changes. He doesn't want to do those 20 changes through 50 different academic files. So what's the quickest way of setting those up? So that's a bit of a tangent. Let's just go through and cover that quickly. What you can do is you can set up one file. So this is our component 1 file. Okay, so it's in a company audit template, but we'll use our imagination and say this is an academy file now. Okay, so what we can do within this, and Tom would want to do, would be to set up his work programs. So we'll say his work programs, the bank and cash. You'd want to go through and tailor that. And you'd want to tailor it in such a way that, okay, this is going to be used throughout all the other academies, and I don't want to have to repeat the same work, because who wants to repeat the same thing? So before the academy season really kicks off, Tom goes into a work program. He goes down and Tom says we need to add in some new procedures. So he adds one in from the content library, really wants to look at the review receipts levels, closing cash in hand, and then he adds those in. And then what he does is he tailors those a little bit as well, because he's not completely happy with the standard procedure and he wants to put a bit more weight behind it. So he goes through and he inserts a sub procedure there, maybe 2 sub procedures, and then just goes through. There we go. Oh, that's loaded. So we'll just call it, again, for a lack of time and a lack of imagination, first and second. There. All right, so at this stage then, Tom doesn't have to repeat that through all the files. So what you can do is you can save this file, close it down, and then what we would suggest in year 1 is that if I close down copy components here, the common components one, is that I could effectively take a copy of this. Okay, so over here, I can go to my desktop, I can go to my group audit data here, I can go to my components, just press the compression here as well. I'm going to not compress this today just because it takes a little bit longer. And again, I don't really want everyone to watch that on the screen. But there's my component 1 file. We can see when it was last updated, 12/22, so no wall over anyone's eyes. And in there's the file. So at this stage here, what I would recommend before you copy these files is that you do compress it. So you saw me a second ago, Tom, not compress it. I do recommend before you copy any Caseware files anywhere that they're compressed. And the reason being is because there's a lot of files and databases in here, and if something goes wrong when I'm copying it over, it could not copy over all the files and cause an issue. Whereas if it's compressed, it will move it in one lump. Okay, so always copy compressed files. But just for demonstration purposes today, I'm going to copy component 1, drop that in there. I'm going to rename it here. Now I'll rename it to component 4. Absolutely fine, but that doesn't rename the file. Okay, and if I click into it, like you probably all guessed, it all says component 1 still. Okay, so we still need to do a bit of work on this. So I'm just going to close this down. And then what we do is let's open up another Caseware. So that should be opening up in a second. Probably on my other screen, so bear with me. Oh no, it's opened up on the right side. Excellent. So what you do then is you go to a rename file, and then you go down and you browse your desktop. And then group audit, components, component 4. Click on component 1 limited, change that to component 4 limited, and then select the generate new identifier for this audit file, and then select rename. Okay, once you do that, it's going to rename all the files for us. The generate new identifier for this file is a key part. Again, Tom, you stressed this on the remote sessions because we've seen the repercussions of it. What we need to do is we need to make sure that Caseware knows that this is an individual and it's a new file for the update process. So when we rename it, tick a new identifier, because then it knows it's not a copy of a file and the update process will work smoothly. Okay. If you've got problems with the update process and you haven't ticked that box, go back, rename the file again and tick the box and it'll all be fine. Okay. So there's no real stress, but just be aware of it. And that stage, then you can go into computer, browse through to that location on your desktop. There's my components, component 4. There's the file, open it up. And in a second, we'll go through to the Word program for banking cash. Again, I spit right down. Nearly forgot what one I even had.
Got some guidance on the, we've got a knowledge base article on renaming files. So if you didn't quite catch that, then don't worry, let us know and we'll point you in the right direction.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. All right, so that's loaded up now. So let's just see if that has all worked and magic. There we go. So there's Tom's edits. There's Tom's setup and those 2 new procedures as I added in. So when you're looking at areas where you've got common types of audits, pension audits, academy audits, especially for academies, where you don't need to really rely upon the roll forward, you could just have a blank file every year, tailor that one file as a master file and use that as a copy to roll out for, say, 20, 30 different academy audits. Then use it because it will save you time tailoring year on year. Also, you may have questions about how to build the accounts in because you prepare the accounts in and you don't want to have to rebuild those from scratch every year. Well, there's nice guidance on the knowledge base that shows you how to copy in the accounts documents from one file to the next. So if anyone's got any queries on that as well, please let us know. All right, so with time running out, we need to get over to Tom. So Tom can show you and talk to you about how we would handle looking at audit exempt files or dormant entities within a group audit file. So Tom, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, I'm just going to share mine. Okay, so hopefully you can see my caseware.
I can.
So we're in the holding company file again that we were looking at earlier. So in terms of bringing in the details of a component that is, in this example, a dormant entity, you've got a couple of ways of doing it. So ultimately, we would recommend using the assurance template. You could use the audit exempt pack to create another caseware file, and you could consolidate that in the same way that Tony was showing you earlier with the other components here. So you could come in here and select new, call it, we're not going to do it now, but you could put in the name of your new component and then link to the existing file. If you're not using the assurance template, or if you or because it's a dormant entity, you're not planning to create a separate caseware file, and you don't really have a lot that you need to highlight that you have an opinion on, then we would say probably the best way to do it is you could add in a new, let's call it dormant entity here, and spell, and then we'll leave it as none. So effectively, this is just a placeholder really for the information that we're going to bring in. If you wanted to, that would then allow you to go to the import screen. You could bring in an XLTB, that sort of thing. But then what we recommend doing here is just add in a new folder. So we could put it anywhere in the document manager, but we'll add in a new folder. Again, we'll call that dormant entity. And then this is an instance where dragging and dropping is absolutely fine because we've got a PDF copy of a TB I've got it in my downloads folder here. So I'm going to drag that into the file because it's outside of caseware. Get rid of that. And that's going to give it a reference to VXT001, but as I'm sure you've all seen before, you can go into properties and you can change that reference and give it a different name if you want it to be something more meaningful. And really, that's going to be the easiest way to get your information in there. Tony, you've got a question.
I do. So we've got, it's about lead schedules whilst we're here. And before we do though, to go to the question, I think for me, that setup is the easiest, clearest way to get those dormant entities into the file. There's no limitations on this either, is there, Tom? You can set as many as you want.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure some people are probably worried about what roll forward and setting this up on year on year. All this information, it all rolls forward as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you have got various roll forward options as well. So for things that you don't want to roll forward, but yes, you can roll all of this forward that we're showing you.
So it's a little bit of setup in the first year. Now, the question I've got, and it's about the group lead schedule documents, it's a question saying we're not getting the most value out of the lead sheet, the trial balance lead sheets and other lead sheets, because it doesn't show the consolidated information in the way we need it to.
That's right.
So is there something we're missing? So Tom, can you just, yes, it perfect.
So I brought up the TV lead sheet there, so you can see it's not very easy to digest. We've got all of the account codes there. This is where we were talking about the abbreviations earlier. So you can see our abbreviations there, COL, CTL, HCL, all down here. It's all bundled in together. Not very easy to interpret. So what we'll do here, we won't touch that one. We'll create a copy of it. So we'll simply just copy and paste. And then we'll go into the properties and we will give this a different name. And we've got this set to account balances at the moment, but we could, change what we want to see there. Let's say group hierarchy with subtotals. That's a good one. But really, the key one here is consolidated view. There's a tick box just there. So if we select consolidated view and now go into our new copy, we can see that each component has got a dedicated column. So it's much easier to digest. Of course, we've got our subtotals in there as well, because that's how we set our view, but we can go into properties and we can say, okay, let's go back to account balances. But the key point there, really, the key tip is getting your components into their dedicated columns.
Definitely. I think it's good for everyone. This is something you can use to help you out, though, and so make sure you don't have to set this up on every single file, because we all know it's like it might be really simple to go and click on that consolidate tick box, Tom. You might be remembering where it is. You can set all these up in the document library as a firm. So the document library I showed you earlier, I was giving examples of like things you could drag in. It might be easier to copy components for, say, management letters or work programs. You could also set up these lead sheets and put them into a document library. And then that way for group audits, you can just drag them over and you don't have to remember year on year how to set these up for any new ones. So consider that, and if anyone wants any guidance on that, let me know. Thank you very much, Tom.
Also worth pointing out, we are slightly over time now, so we won't be able to show you, but if you wanted any guidance on eliminating journals as well, we've got plenty of guidance available, so let us know and we can point you in the right direction there. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
I'm going to start sharing mine. So hopefully everyone can see now the new slide coming up for upcoming webinars.
There we go.
In 2021, we've got some cloud importing and mapping introduction tomorrow, and we've got some updates to Charting Academies. So it's big day tomorrow. So you can join anyone who's wants to look at the new Carrier products and the importing features in there and the enhancements what we've built into a cloud environment. There's still time to register, so feel free to come along. And then we've got some smart engagement key features as well. That Tom, you're involved in that one, eh?
I am, yes. So we did run this recently. We're going to run it again because we're excited about these key features that we want to show you across all of the smart engagement products. So head over to the events page of the website. You can sign up there. You'll see the agenda, but you can also register, as you know, to attend.
Excellent. So that's caseware.co.uk/events. Again, just showing the events page there. And the next thing is just other mediums. All the recordings that you're going to be seeing for webinars are all going to be available on YouTube now. If anyone has any problems accessing YouTube, that's not a good medium for you. Can you just throw something in the chat field to let us know, so we can keep a track on who can get access to these and who can't. So that way we can make them available in other mediums like the knowledge base as well. All right. So other than that, that's all we've got time for today. So thank you very much for everyone who attended. I hope you found some useful information or tips today, and look forward to chatting to you next time. Take care and speak to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.